It was my 68th birthday, and I spent the entire morning baking my signature triple-layer carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and nutmeg, warm and inviting, exactly how I'd kept my home for the past 40 years. I smoothed the last swirl of frosting just as the clock struck noon. Perfect timing. The afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen windows, casting a golden glow on the granite countertop I'd saved years to install. I'd invited my son Robert, his wife Jennifer, and their 2 children for dinner. Despite the tension that had been building between us lately, I held on to hope that my birthday might bring us together in a way regular Sundays hadn't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Dorothy Miller, though everyone's called me Dot since before I can remember. My late husband Thomas used to say it suited me. Small but significant, making everything around you more complete. I missed him every day since he passed 5 years ago, but never more than during family gatherings when his gentle humor would have smoothed over the rough edges of conversation. I spent the afternoon preparing Robert's favorite meal, slow-roasted beef brisket with caramelized onions, golden potato gratin, and fresh green beans with toasted almonds. The same meal I'd made for every special occasion since he was tall enough to reach the kitchen counter and help me stir. Cooking was my love. Language, the way I showed my family they mattered to me. With Thomas gone, these shared meals had become even more precious. At precisely 5 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I wiped my hands on my apron and moved toward the front door, heart fluttering with anticipation. Robert's sleek black SUV pulled up, the vehicle far too expensive for a high school history teacher's salary, but Jennifer had insisted they needed it to maintain appearances in their upscale neighborhood. I watched through the window as Jennifer stepped out first, checking her reflection in the car window before smoothing her designer dress. Even for a simple family dinner, she was dressed like she was attending a country club luncheon. My granddaughter, Emma, 16 and already her mother's mirror image, exited next, eyes glued to her phone. 10-year-old Lucas bounded out last, the only one who seemed genuinely excited to be there. "Grandma Dot!" Lucas launched himself into my arms the moment they entered. I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of outdoors and boyhood that reminded me so much of Robert at that age. "Happy birthday, Mom," Robert said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. He'd grown into his father's height, but none of his warmth. There was a stiffness to him now that broke my heart a little every time I noticed it. Jennifer extended her hand for a formal shake, as if we were business associates instead of family. "Dorothy?" she said with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "The house smells rustic." I chose to take it as a compliment. "Thank you, dear. I've been cooking all day." Emma finally looked up from her phone long enough to mumble, "Happy birthday, grandmother," before returning to whatever was happening on her screen. "Let me give you the grand tour," I said to Lucas, who was the only one who hadn't seen the recent updates I'd made to the house. After Thomas passed, I'd gradually been renovating our old farmhouse, room by room. Nothing extravagant, just enough to keep the place feeling fresh and lived in, rather than a shrine to the past. "Mom, is there somewhere I can change?" Jennifer interjected, holding up a small tote bag. "I've been in meetings all day and wanted to get more comfortable." Of course, use the guest bathroom. It's the same place it's always been." I gestured down the hallway, wondering why she needed to change when she was already dressed more formally than the occasion called for. While Jennifer disappeared to change, Robert wandered into the living room, inspecting the new bookshelves I'd installed. "These are nice, Mom. Did you hire someone?" "I did it myself," I said proudly. "Your father taught me enough about carpentry over the years. The hardware store cut the wood to my measurements, and I assembled everything here." Robert looked skeptical. "You should have called me. I could have helped or at least hired someone. For you. I don't need to hire people for everything, Robert. I'm perfectly capable. This was an old argument between us. Since Thomas died, Robert seemed to think I'd lost the ability to function independently, despite all evidence to the contrary. The tension was momentarily broken when Lucas discovered the wooden train set I'd restored, the same one that had belonged to Robert as a child. "Dad, look, it's your old train." For a moment, Robert's face softened with nostalgia. "I can't believe you still have this." "Some things are worth keeping," I said quietly. Jennifer returned wearing what appeared to be casual loungewear, though it still looked expensive enough to be featured in a magazine. "Shall we eat? Emma has a study group call at 7:30. I nodded, trying not to feel hurt that they were already planning their exit before we'd even sat down to dinner. "Everything's ready. Lucas, would you help me bring the food to the table?" The dining room table was set with my best china, the Wedgwood set Thomas had given me on our 25th anniversary. Crystal water glasses and polished silver flatware completed the setting. I'd even used the linen napkins embroidered with tiny forget-me-nots that had been a wedding gift from my mother. Jennifer paused in the doorway, her lips pursed. "Oh, I thought we'd just be having a casual dinner." "It's Grandma's birthday," Lucas said, as if that explained everything. And to me it did. "I always use the good china for special occasions," I explained, placing the brisket on the table. "Life's too short to keep beautiful things hidden away." Jennifer exchanged a look with Robert that I couldn't quite interpret. "Right. Well, I'll just go get the kids settled." Once we were all seated around the table, I served each plate carefully, making sure everyone got their favorites. Lucas dug in immediately with an appreciative, while Emma picked at her food, occasionally glancing longingly at her phone, which Robert had insisted she leave in her purse during dinner. "So, Mom," Robert said after a few minutes of awkward silence, "have you given any more thought to what we discussed last month?" My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "You mean about selling the house?" "It's just too much for you now," Jennifer interjected smoothly. "All this space, the maintenance, the yard work. You'd be so much more comfortable in that retirement community. We showed you." "Sunshine Meadows," I said flatly, "where they schedule my meals and activities like I'm back in kindergarten." "They have a wonderful social program," Jennifer continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "And the security is excellent. We worry about you out here all alone." "I've lived here for 43 years, I reminded them. "This house is filled with memories. It's where I raised Robert, where Thomas and I built our life together." "Memories can come with you, Mom," Robert said, using the gentle tone he reserved for his most difficult students. "But at your age, practicality needs to take priority." "My age?" I set down my fork. "I'm 68, not 98. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I still drive, I still garden, I just installed bookshelves by myself. What exactly about my age is concerning you? Another look passed between Robert and Jennifer. This time, I recognized it for what it was. Impatience. "Property values in this area have skyrocketed," Jennifer said, dropping any pretense of concern for my welfare. "If you sold now, you could make a significant profit. Enough to live very comfortably at Sunshine Meadows and have plenty left over." "Left over for what, precisely?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Robert at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We've been thinking of investing in a vacation property, something the whole family could enjoy." "The whole family except Grandma," Lucas piped up unexpectedly, "because she'd be at the old people place." "Lucas!" Jennifer scolded, but I couldn't help smiling at my grandson's straightforward assessment. "Out of the mouths of babes," I murmured, reaching over to ruffle his hair. Jennifer's phone buzzed, and she immediately reached for it, apparently exempt from the no phones at dinner rule. Her eyes lit up as she read the message. Oh, Patricia just confirmed they can host us for the Labor Day weekend at their lake house. We need to bring paper plates and plastic cups. She looked up at me. Dorothy, do you have any we could borrow? I'd rather not buy disposables when we only need them occasionally. I might have some in the pantry from the church picnic last summer, I said, getting up to check. As I searched through the pantry shelves, I could hear Jennifer's voice drift in from the dining room. And honestly, this Wedgwood pattern is so dated. When we sell the house, you should just donate most of this stuff. No one uses formal china anymore. Jennifer. Robert's voice had a warning tone, probably remembering I was within earshot. What? I'm just being practical. My mother already has too many sets of china as it is, so we certainly don't need to inherit more. I returned to the dining room, paper plates in hand. Found some. Jennifer barely looked up. Great. Just set them aside for now. Oh, and could you pack up some of that cake for us to take home? Emma has that study session, so we can't stay. For dessert. Of course, I said, my birthday cake suddenly feeling very heavy in my stomach. Robert at least had the grace to look embarrassed. Maybe we could stay for a quick slice, Jen. It's Mom's birthday after all. Jennifer glanced at her watch. We really should get going soon. Traffic will be terrible if we wait much longer. I started clearing the plates, trying to hide my disappointment. This was becoming a pattern. Quick visits, conversations dominated by Jennifer's social calendar, or thinly veiled suggestions about selling my home, and always an excuse to leave early. As I stood at the sink rinsing dishes, I heard the distinctive notification sound from my banking app. Probably another automatic payment going through. I dried my hands and pulled out my phone to check. The notification wasn't about a payment. It was an alert about a late mortgage payment, not for my house, which had been paid off decades ago, but for 1847 Lakeside Drive. Robert and Jennifer's address. This wasn't the first late payment notification I'd received. As a major shareholder and board member of First Regional Bank, I received alerts about significant accounts, especially those with repeated issues. I'd specifically requested to be informed about this particular mortgage when I learned, through a casual comment from our bank president at a charity gala, that my son and daughter-in-law had taken out a substantial loan for their house. What Robert and Jennifer didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that in the years after Thomas died, I'd channeled my grief into learning about investment and finance. Thomas had left me comfortable, but it was my own careful investing that had grown our modest savings into something substantial. Substantial enough that I now owned significant shares in several local businesses, including First Regional Bank. I slipped my phone back into my pocket just as Jennifer entered the kitchen, cake container in hand. We really should be going. Thank you for dinner, Dorothy. I turned around slowly, a decision crystallizing in my mind. 5 years of subtle dismissals, of being treated like a burden rather than a person with value to contribute. 5 years of watching my son become someone I barely recognized under Jennifer's influence. Before you go, I said calmly, I wanted to talk to you both about something important. Jennifer looked impatient, but Robert appeared in the doorway behind her. What is it, Mom? I'm not selling my house, I said firmly. Not now, not ever. This is my home, and I'm perfectly capable of maintaining it. Jennifer's smile tightened. Dorothy, we're just trying to help. I can possibly quite a lot of things, I interrupted. For instance, I can possibly tell you that I'm well aware your mortgage payment is late. Again. The 3rd time this year, in fact. The color drained from Jennifer's face. How would you know that? Because I sit on the board of First Regional Bank, I said simply. In fact, I own a significant portion of it. Robert stared at me, mouth agape. What are you talking about? Mom, if this is some kind of joke? It's not a joke, Robert. After your father died, I needed something to focus on besides my grief. I took finance courses online. I joined investment groups. I learned how to make my money work for me. I moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of champagne I'd been saving. I was going to tell you tonight over cake and champagne, but since you're in such a hurry to leave. Jennifer looked like she might faint. You own part of our bank? I own 22% to be exact, enough to have significant influence in the board's decisions. I set the champagne on the counter, including decisions about problematic mortgages. Are we in trouble with the bank? Robert asked, his voice small in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child afraid of thunderstorms. Not yet, I said. But you would be eventually if you continue spending beyond your means. The lake house, plans, the country club membership, Emma's private tennis coach. Do you really think a teacher's salary and a part-time real estate agent's commissions can sustain all that? Jennifer's shock was quickly turning to anger. You've been spying on us? On our finances? I've been protecting my son, I corrected her, and my grandchildren. I could have stepped in at any point, paid off your mortgage, solved your problems, but that wouldn't have helped you learn to live within your means. So what are you saying? Robert asked. That you're going to use your position to pressure us about our mortgage? I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. No, Robert. I'm saying that I want you to stop pressuring me about my house. I'm saying that I have resources and knowledge you've never bothered to ask me about because you've been too busy treating me like I'm helpless. I reached for the cake container in Jennifer's hands. I'm saying that I want to have my birthday cake with my family, and I want to be treated with the respect I've earned, not just because I have money or influence, but because I'm your mother. Is that really too much to ask? The kitchen fell silent, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking between the adults with confusion. Are we staying for cake? I looked at my son, waiting for his response. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised, thoughtful, kind, respectful. Yes, Robert said finally, his voice thick with what might have been shame. We're staying for Grandma's cake. Jennifer stood stiffly, clearly fuming but unwilling to make a scene in front of the children. Fine. I'll call Patricia and tell her we'll be later than expected. As Jennifer stalked out of the kitchen, phone already in hand, Robert stepped closer to me. Mom, I had no idea. About the bank. About any of it. You never asked, I said simply. You were too busy trying to manage me instead of talking to me. He looked down at his hands. His father's hands, though Thomas had used his to build things. To help others, not to take. I'm sorry. That's not who Dad raised me to be. No, it's not, I agreed. But it's never too late to remember who you are. Lucas tugged on my apron. Grandma, can I have a corner piece with extra frosting? I smiled down at him, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to release. Of course you can, sweetheart. Let's go cut the cake. As I carried my triple-layer carrot cake to the dining room table, I felt a curious lightness. The china was still out, the silver still gleaming under the dining room light. Nothing external had changed, and yet everything felt different. For the first time in years, I was being seen. Not as a problem to solve or an asset to manage, but as a person, with value beyond what I could give to others. I set the cake in the center of the table and picked up the knife, pausing before making the first cut. I'd like to make a toast, I said, looking at each face around my table. To family, to honesty, and to never underestimating someone just because they've been around a while. I cut into the cake, serving Lucas his corner piece first. As I handed Robert his slice, our eyes met, and I saw something there I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect, and perhaps a touch of awe. It shouldn't have taken revealing my financial position to earn that look, but I was pragmatic enough to know that sometimes people needed a wake-up call. Jennifer returned, her face a careful mask of politeness. Emma's study session has been pushed back, she announced, sliding into her seat. So we can stay for cake after all. How convenient, I murmured, but passed her a slice anyway. As we ate in silence that was only occasionally broken by Lucas's appreciative noises, I contemplated the paper plates still sitting on my counter. Such a small thing, really, being asked to provide disposable dinnerware while my own special china was dismissed as dated and unnecessary. But it had been the culmination of countless small dismissals, the final push I needed to reveal a part of myself I'd kept hidden. "This is really good, Grandma," Emma said unexpectedly, looking up from her plate. "Could you teach me how to make it sometime?" Before Jennifer could object or make an excuse, I smiled at my granddaughter. "I'd love that, Emma. How about next weekend?" Emma glanced at her mother, then back at me. "Yeah, next weekend would be good." After they left, much later than they'd originally planned, I stood in my kitchen washing the Wedgwood china by hand as I always did. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like mine, claimed not just by memories, but by a newfound sense of power. I dried each plate carefully and returned it to the cabinet where it belonged. Then I took the paper plates Jennifer had asked for and dropped them in the recycling bin. They wouldn't be needed after all. The next morning, I received a text from Robert. "Mom, can we talk? Just the two of us. Lunch tomorrow?" I typed back a simple, "Yes," then set my phone aside and went out to tend my garden. The tomatoes were coming in nicely, and the roses Thomas had planted for our 30th anniversary were in full bloom. As I knelt in the soil, hands busy with the satisfying work of nurturing living things, I thought about the boundaries I'd finally established, and the truth I'd finally spoken. Sometimes, just like in gardening, you had to clear away what wasn't working to make room for new growth. It might be messy and even painful in the moment, but it was always worth it in the end. When Robert arrived for lunch the following day, he came alone and bearing a small gift bag. "Happy belated birthday, Mom," he said, looking more like himself than he had in years. Inside the bag was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature house. Attached was a card that read simply, "Your home is your castle. I'm sorry I forgot that." I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, feeling the weight of the little house against my skin. "It's beautiful, Robert. Thank you." "Mom, about the bank. About everything," he began, clearly struggling to find the right words. I reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't need to be embarrassed, but you do need to start making better financial decisions. Not because I'm on the bank's board, but because I want you to be secure and happy without the stress of living beyond your means." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "Jennifer and I had a long talk last night. A lot of things are going to change." "Good," I said, then added with a small smile. "And you can tell Jennifer she's welcome to use my china any time, but the paper plates are off the table." Robert laughed, a genuine laugh that reminded me of his father. And as we sat there in my dining room, the sun streaming through windows that had witnessed over 4 decades of family meals, arguments, celebrations, and reconciliations, Sakinde knew that sometimes the greatest power comes not from what you own, but from finally owning who you are. The weeks following my birthday revelation brought a strange new dynamic to our family. Robert called more frequently, his voice carrying a tentative respect that hadn't been there before. Jennifer, on the other hand, had gone conspicuously quiet. No more suggestions about retirement communities, no more casual dismissals of my capabilities. The awkward peace felt like walking on glass, pristine but precarious. It was during this delicate time that I received an unexpected invitation. To their home for Sunday dinner. "Emma specifically asked if you could come," Robert explained over the phone. "She wants to learn how to make your carrot cake." I agreed, of course. Any chance to connect with my granddaughter was worth navigating whatever undercurrents remained from our confrontation. I spent Saturday afternoon gathering ingredients, packing them carefully into the wicker basket Thomas had bought for me at a farmer's market decades ago. Some tools of the baking trade were best used in their familiar, my own well-seasoned mixing bowls and measuring cups that had produced countless successful desserts over the years. When Sunday arrived, I drove myself to their sprawling colonial in Oak Ridge Estates, a neighborhood built on former farmland where houses now stood like grand monuments to success, each one trying to outshine its neighbor. Their 3-car garage, immaculate landscaping, an imposing stone facade spoke volumes about the image they were desperate to maintain. An image, I now knew, that was mortgaged to the hilt. Lucas spotted me first, waving enthusiastically from the front door before running down the driveway to help with my basket. "Dad's grilling steaks," he informed me importantly. "And Mom made the house super clean for you." "Did she now?" I murmured, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. Children always revealed the truths adults tried to hide. Robert greeted me with a genuine hug, the first in longer than I cared to remember. "Mom, I'm glad you came. Emma's been talking about this all week." "Where is my baking apprentice?" I asked, looking around the marble-floored entryway that always felt more like a hotel lobby than a home. "In the kitchen with Jen," Robert said, taking my basket. "They're setting up for your baking lesson." As we walked through the formal living room, a space so pristinely arranged it seemed to repel human presence, I caught sight of a familiar book on the coffee table. Financial Independence After 60. I'd read it cover to cover after Thomas died. Interesting choice of reading material for a house that had previously displayed only coffee table books about luxury travel destinations and architectural marvels. Jennifer stood in the center of her enormous chef's kitchen, arranging mixing bowls on the island countertop. Despite the casual occasion, she wore tailored slacks and a silk blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Everything about her screamed controlled perfection, from her precisely applied makeup to the exact alignment of the spatulas she'd laid out. "Dorothy," she said, her smile tight but present, "Emma's just washing up. We've cleared the afternoon for your baking lesson." "That's thoughtful of you, Jennifer," I replied, noting the formal place settings visible in the dining room beyond. Crystal glasses, fine china, sterling silver flatware, all out for a simple family dinner. Quite a change from the paper plates she'd tried to borrow from me. Emma appeared, hair tied back and hands still damp from washing. "Grandma, I got everything. Ready. Mom said we could use her special mixing bowls, but I told her you probably brought your own." "Smart girl," I said, unpacking my basket. "Bakers get attached to their tools. They develop a kind of memory over time." Jennifer hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the disarray baking would bring to her immaculate kitchen, but trying not to show it. "Can I get you anything, Dorothy? Tea? Coffee?" "Coffee would be lovely," I answered, surprised by the genuine offer. "Black, please." As Jennifer busied herself with the elaborate espresso machine that dominated one counter, I turned my attention to Emma. "First rule of baking, read the entire recipe before you start. No surprises that way." We fell into an easy rhythm, measuring and mixing while I explained the importance of room temperature ingredients and the proper way to fold in flour without overworking the batter. Emma proved to be an attentive student, asking thoughtful questions and taking genuine pleasure in the process. "It's like chemistry," she observed, watching the batter transform as we added each ingredient. "That's exactly right," I agreed. "Baking is science with a dash of love thrown in. Your grandfather used to say cooking is art, but baking is alchemy." "Dad never mentions Grandpa," Emma said, lowering her voice even though Jennifer had stepped out to take a phone call. I paused, whisk in hand. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man. He could build anything, fix anything, and he made the best pancakes you've ever tasted." "Better than yours?" Emma asked skeptically. "Much better," I laughed. Some recipes can't be passed down. They go with the person who created them. Robert appeared in the doorway, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Dad's pancakes were legendary, he confirmed. Sunday mornings, he'd be up before dawn mixing the batter. Said it needed to rest, like good dough. I didn't know that, Emma said, looking between us with curiosity. There's a lot about your family you don't know, I said gently. Stories get lost when we don't share them. Jennifer returned, her phone clutched tightly in her hand and her expression strained. The Hendersons just canceled for the charity gala next weekend. Apparently, they've decided to scale back on commitments. The air quotes around her words dripped with disdain. That's the third couple this month, Robert muttered, exchanging a look with his wife. People talk, Jennifer said tightly. Ever since the Morgans downsized so dramatically, everyone's suddenly concerned about living authentically. More scornful air quotes. It's becoming impossible to fill a table at these events. I focused on showing Emma how to properly grease and flour the cake pans, but my ears caught every word of this revealing exchange. The social fabric of their artificial world was beginning to fray, it seemed. We could always scale back ourselves, Robert suggested quietly. The membership fees alone. Don't start, Jennifer cut him off, then seemed to remember my presence. She forced a smile. Dorothy, how's the cake coming along? It smells wonderful already. Almost ready for the oven, I replied, pretending I hadn't noticed their tense exchange. Emma has a natural talent for this. Grandma says I have the right touch for folding in flour, Emma beamed, proudly displaying her cake batter. Not too much stirring or it gets tough. A valuable life skill, Jennifer commented with what sounded like genuine warmth, surprising me. Perhaps there was more to my daughter-in-law than I'd given her credit for. While the cakes baked, filling the house with the comforting aroma of spices and sugar, we moved to the back patio, where Robert was tending to steaks on his elaborate outdoor kitchen setup. Lucas was engrossed in constructing an intricate fort, from patio cushions, occasionally calling for Robert's approval of his architectural decisions. Mom, can I get you something to drink? Robert asked, gesturing to a well-stocked bar cart nearby. Wine? Gin and tonic? A glass of white wine would be nice, I said, settling into a cushioned chair with a view of their expansive backyard. The property backed onto a small wooded area, providing privacy and a sense of seclusion despite the neighboring houses being quite close. As Robert handed me a glass of chilled Chardonnay, I noticed his hands, how they'd grown to look so much like his father's, right down to the slight callus on the right thumb where Thomas's hammer had often rested. But where Thomas's hands had been steady and sure, Robert seemed to tremble slightly as he passed me the glass. Everything all right? I asked quietly. He glanced toward Jennifer, who was showing Emma how to set the outdoor dining table. Just some work stress, he said, turning back to the grill with more attention than the steaks required. I didn't press. Years of motherhood had taught me that some conversations couldn't be forced. They needed space to unfold naturally. Instead, I watched Lucas construct his fort, occasionally offering suggestions when asked, but mostly just enjoying his creative process. The meal itself was delicious. Perfectly grilled steaks, roasted vegetables, and a fresh salad. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, mostly centered around Lucas's upcoming science fair project and Emma's debate team competitions. No mention of retirement communities, no subtle hints about my age or capabilities. Just family catching up, sharing stories, enjoying food together. It wasn't until we were enjoying slices of Emma's successful carrot cake that Jennifer cleared her throat and set down her fork. Dorothy, she began, her voice carrying that practiced smoothness I'd come to recognize as her business tone. I wanted to apologize for how I've treated you. Robert and I have had some illuminating conversations since your birthday. I took a small bite of cake, giving myself time to consider her words. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. I've realized I've been projecting some of my own insecurities onto you, she continued, looking uncomfortable but determined. My own mother was never self-sufficient. After my father died, she became completely dependent on me and my sister. I think I assumed the same would happen with you. This moment of vulnerability from Jennifer was unexpected. I'd spent years seeing her as a one-dimensional character in my life story, the cold, status-obsessed daughter-in-law. Now, watching her struggle to articulate something genuine, I glimpsed the complexity beneath her perfect facade. Our situations are quite different, I said gently, but I understand how easy it is to project our fears onto others. Robert reached over and took Jennifer's hand, a gesture of support I hadn't seen between them in years. We've been making some changes, he said. Practical changes. We've put the country club membership on pause, Jennifer added, looking like the admission physically pained her. And we're considering downsizing. This house. It's become more of a burden than a pleasure. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was astonished by this turn of events. These are significant decisions. What brought them on? Robert and Jennifer exchanged glances. It was Robert who answered, his voice steadier than it had been all evening. Reality, Mom. We've been living beyond our means for years, accumulating debt that we justified as investments in our lifestyle. After your birthday, we took a hard look at our finances. It wasn't pretty. The mortgage is just the tip of the iceberg, Jennifer admitted, her perfect posture faltering slightly. Credit cards, personal loans, Emma's private school tuition, Lucas's summer programs. We've been drowning, but pretending we're just taking a luxurious bath. I couldn't help but smile at her analogy. Perhaps Jennifer had more self-awareness than I'd given her credit for. We'd like your advice, Robert said, the words clearly difficult for him to voice. Not your money, he added quickly. Just your wisdom. How did you and Dad manage to live so well within your means? How did you build financial security without sacrificing everything that makes life enjoyable? The question touched me deeply. For years, I'd felt invisible to my son and his wife, my lifetime of experience and knowledge dismissed as irrelevant in their modern world. Now, they were looking to me not as a burden or a problem to solve, but as a resource, someone with valuable insights to share. Your father and I had a simple philosophy, I began, setting down my fork to give the conversation my full attention. We distinguished between what would bring lasting joy and what would bring momentary pleasure. The house was worth the investment because it gave us a stable place to build memories and security. But cars? Those were just transportation, not status symbols. But surely you and Grandpa wanted nice things too, Emma interjected, surprisingly engaged in this adult conversation. Of course we did, sweetheart. We weren't saints or ascetics, but we waited until we could truly afford those things. Your grandfather drove the same pickup truck for 17 years. When he finally replaced it, he paid cash for a new one because he'd been saving a little each month specifically for that purpose. Robert nodded slowly. I remember that old blue Ford. I was embarrassed by it as a teenager. All my friends' parents had newer vehicles. And now? I asked softly. Now I wish I'd paid more attention to the lesson you were teaching, he admitted. Delayed gratification isn't exactly celebrated these days. It never was, I countered. Your generation didn't invent consumer debt or keeping up with the Joneses. Your father and I just happened to witness our own parents struggle during harder economic times. It made an impression. Jennifer, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. My mother was always chasing the lifestyle she felt she deserved. Designer clothes, expensive vacations, the right addresses. After my father died, We discovered he'd been taking out second mortgages to maintain her standard of living. There was nothing left. Her revelation made so many pieces fall into place. Jennifer's obsession with appearances, her push for Robert to earn more, their precarious financial situation despite two incomes, all echoing the patterns of her childhood. "And yet you followed the same path," I observed, not unkindly. "I thought I was being smarter about it," she said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "Leveraging assets, building equity through real estate, all the things the financial gurus recommend. But in the end, I'm just like her. Buying things I can't afford to impress people I don't even like." Robert placed his hand over hers. "We're like her," he corrected gently. "I've been an equal partner in these decisions." A comfortable silence fell over the table as we each contemplated the conversation. Lucas, who had been remarkably patient during this adult discussion, finally piped up. "Does this mean we're selling our house? Because Tommy at school moved to a smaller house, and now he has a way cooler room because his mom let him paint the walls black." The tension broke as we all laughed, grateful for the child's perspective that cut through the adult complexities. "We're considering all options," Jennifer told him, ruffling his hair affectionately. "But I draw the line at black walls." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, I found myself in a strangely peaceful place. The wall between my life and theirs, built of assumptions, resentments, and miscommunications, had begun to crumble. Not all at once, and not without some structural damage in the process, but enough to let light pass through from both sides. "I should be heading home," I said, gathering my baking equipment. "It gets dark earlier these days." "I'll help you." "To the car," Robert offered, picking up my basket. As we walked down the driveway, the evening air cool against our skin, Robert spoke quietly. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, about the kind of man he was, the kind of father. I've been thinking about what he'd say if he could see how I've been living." I stopped by my car, turning to face my son in the fading light. In that moment, he looked so much like the thoughtful boy he'd once been, the one who'd ask profound questions about the stars and worry about whether ants had feelings. "Your father wasn't perfect, Robert. He made plenty of mistakes. We both did. But he lived according to his values, not someone else's expectations. That's what made him sleep soundly at night." Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I haven't been sleeping well for years, Mom." I reached up and placed my palm against his cheek, just as I used to when he was a little boy with a skinned knee or a broken toy. "Then perhaps it's time to make some changes that align with who you really are, not who you think you should be." He nodded, leaning slightly into my hand before straightening up. "We're meeting with a financial advisor next week, someone Jennifer found who specializes in debt reduction and realistic planning. It's a start." "It's more than a start," I assured him. "It's a course correction. Those are never easy, but always worthwhile." As I drove home through the gathering darkness, I thought about the unexpected turn our family dynamic had taken. I hadn't revealed my position at the bank to shame them or to wield power. I'd simply reached a breaking point where hiding part of myself felt more painful than any potential fallout from the truth. And now, that truth had created an opening for greater honesty on all sides. Jennifer's admission about her mother, Robert's, reflections on his father, even my own acknowledgement that I'd perhaps judged them too harshly at times. We were all works in progress, stumbling toward better versions of ourselves. The following Saturday, I received a text message from Jennifer, the first direct communication she'd initiated outside of family gatherings. It contained a photo of Emma in my kitchen apron, which I'd apparently left at their house, proudly displaying a carrot cake she'd made on her own. The message read, "She insisted on making this for her debate team bake sale. Said your recipe was technically superior. To anything we could find online, you've created a baking monster. Thank you. Those last two words felt significant. An olive branch extended across the battlefield of our complicated relationship. I texted back a simple, "She's a natural," glad to pass on the tradition. Then, after a moment's consideration, I added, "I have some of Thomas's old woodworking books that might interest Lucas. He has his grandfather's eye for structure." Jennifer's response came quickly. "He would love that. Maybe you could show him some basics. We don't have proper tools, but Robert has been talking about setting up a small workshop in the garage." I smiled at my phone, this small electronic window into a relationship that was slowly transforming. I'd be delighted. Thomas always said that working with your hands keeps you grounded when your mind is troubled. "We could use some grounding," came Jennifer's reply. "All of us." The next morning, I found myself in my garage, opening dusty boxes that contained Thomas's carefully preserved tools. His hand planes, chisels, and measuring instruments had been untouched since his death, preserved like artifacts from another time. I ran my fingers along the smooth wooden handles, worn to a polish by decades of use. I could almost feel the warmth of his hands lingering there. "These were waiting for the right moment," I said aloud to the empty garage, my voice echoing, slightly among the stored memories. "I think that moment has finally arrived." I selected a beginner's set of tools: a small hammer, a set of screwdrivers, a handsaw with a guard, and a few pieces of Thomas's prized oak that he'd been saving for a special project. The wood had aged beautifully, its grain deepening over the years into something even more precious than when he'd first acquired it. As I arranged these treasures in an old toolbox, I felt a sense of continuity that had been missing since Thomas died. The thread of family connection, temporarily frayed, was being rewoven with new patterns and stronger fibers, not replacing what was lost, but creating something new that honored what came before. I closed the toolbox, hearing the familiar click of its latches, the same sound that had often signaled the beginning of a weekend project when Robert was a boy. Thomas would open that toolbox with a ceremonial air, as if unveiling the secrets of the universe. In many ways, for a young boy, eager to learn, that's exactly what it had been. Now it would be Lucas's turn to discover the satisfaction of creating something with his own two hands, to learn that mistakes were opportunities, not failures, to understand that patience and precision were their own rewards. These were lessons that couldn't be taught through words alone. They had to be experienced, felt, absorbed through the transformation of raw materials into something useful or beautiful. I placed the toolbox in my car trunk alongside a few simple project plans I'd printed out: a birdhouse, a small bookshelf, a treasure box with a sliding lid. Lucas could choose where to begin his journey into craftsmanship, just as Robert had once done under Thomas's gentle guidance. The circle was continuing, not exactly as it had before, but with its essential character intact. Wisdom passing from generation to generation, adapting to new circumstances but carrying forward the values that had sustained us through challenging times. As I closed the trunk, my phone chimed with a message from Robert. "Lucas is counting the minutes until you arrive. He's already cleared a workbench space in the garage. Jennifer says to warn you that she's cooking lunch herself. No caterers this time. Progress comes in many forms." I laughed out loud, startling a nearby sparrow into flight. Yes, progress indeed. Sometimes it arrived in unexpected packages: a humbling financial revelation, an awkward family dinner, a granddaughter's interest in baking, a grandson's excitement about woodworking. Small moments that, strung together, created the possibility of transformation. I texted back, looking forward to it all: the woodworking, the home-cooked meal, and especially the company. Some things are worth waiting for. Driving toward their house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The burden of unspoken truths and suppressed resentments had been heavy, weighing down every interaction with my son's family. Now, with those burdens beginning to lift, I could glimpse a new landscape of possibilities stretching before us. Not perfect, certainly. There would still be disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of frustration. But somehow, revealing, my secret strength had created space for genuine connection rather than power struggles. By showing them I didn't need their approval or support, I'd paradoxically opened the door to a more authentic relationship. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed subtle changes to the property. The ostentatious seasonal flower arrangements that had previously flanked the entrance were gone, replaced by simple potted herbs. The second luxury car that usually occupied the third garage bay was missing. Small adjustments, perhaps, but telling ones. Lucas burst through the front door. Before I'd even turned off the engine, his face alight with anticipation. Behind him, Robert emerged more slowly, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, a domestic image so reminiscent of Thomas that my heart seized momentarily. "Grandma's here with the tools," Lucas announced to the world at large. "Dad says I can build anything I want as long as it doesn't involve fire or breaking any major building codes." "Sound parameters," I agreed, popping the trunk. "Shall we see what treasures we've got to work with?" As Lucas peered into the toolbox with reverent wonder, Robert moved closer to me. "Thanks for doing this, Mom, for passing on Dad's legacy." "Some legacies can't stay boxed up forever," I replied, watching Lucas carefully lift one of Thomas's hand planes, testing its weight in his small hands. "They need to breathe, to continue growing." Robert nodded, understanding flowing between us without further words needed. We both watched as Lucas discovered the pieces of oak, running his fingers along the grain with instinctive appreciation. "Is this really for me to use?" he asked, eyes wide. "It looks expensive." "It's not about money," I told him, closing the trunk. "It's about potential. Your grandfather saved that wood for something special. I think he'd be very pleased to know it's going to help teach his grandson." Lucas clutched a piece to his chest as if he'd been given a sacred relic. In many ways, he had. "I'll be super careful with it," he promised solemnly. "Not too careful," I cautioned him with a wink. "The best projects come from being brave enough to make a few mistakes along the way." As we walked toward the house, Lucas running ahead with the news of our woodworking plans, Robert fell into step beside me. "Jennifer's inside preparing lunch. She's actually following a recipe, a first in recent memory. We've been making a lot of firsts lately." "First steps are always the hardest," I said, "but also the most important." He nodded, then hesitated before adding, "We've decided to sell the house. Not immediately, but we've started the process, looking at options, figuring out what we can realistically afford without stretching ourselves thin." The admission hung in the air between us, significant not just for its practical implications but for what it represented. A rejection of appearances in favor of substance, a choosing of contentment over status. "That's a courageous decision," I told him honestly. "Terrifying is more like it," he admitted with a wry smile. "But also liberating, somehow. Like we're finally making choices instead of just following a script." We paused at the threshold of the grand house that had never quite felt like a home. "It's just a building," I said quietly. "Home is what you create inside it. Your father and I moved 3 times before settling in the house where you grew up, but we were home in each place because we were together." Robert's eyes grew distant, with memory. "I barely remember the apartment we lived in when I was really little. Just fragments. The tire swing in the courtyard, the way the kitchen always smelled like coffee, the creaky floorboard by my bedroom." "But happy fragments," I noted. "Very happy," he confirmed. "Maybe that's what we've been missing. We've been so focused on having the perfect setting that we forgot to create the actual memories worth preserving." From inside came the sound of Jennifer's laughter mingled with Emma's voice, followed by Lucas calling for us to hurry up. The moment of reflection passed, but its impact lingered as we stepped inside to join the rest of the family. The kitchen was a controlled chaos of cooking activity, so different from the sterile perfection I'd grown accustomed to in Jennifer's domain. A light dusting of flour covered one counter, vegetable peelings gathered in a small compost bin, and something aromatic simmered on the stove. "Dorothy!" Jennifer greeted me, a smudge of what looked like tomato sauce on her cheek. "I hope you like lasagna. It's my grandmother's recipe, the one good thing she passed down to my mother, who passed it to me." "I love lasagna," I assured her, charmed by this new, less polished version of my daughter-in-law. "Can I help with anything?" "Actually, yes," she said, handing me a wooden spoon. "This sauce needs regular stirring while I finish the salad. Emma's handling garlic bread duty." The domestic scene was so unexpectedly normal, so refreshingly genuine compared to the carefully orchestrated performances of previous family gatherings. As I stirred the rich tomato sauce, listening to Emma describe her latest debate tournament victory, and watching Lucas spread out his potential woodworking projects on the breakfast table for Robert's input, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This natural, imperfect family interaction was what I'd been missing. Not grand gestures or formal recognition, but simple inclusion in the everyday fabric of their lives. Being needed not as a problem to solve or an asset to manage, but as a fully dimensional person with skills to contribute and wisdom to share. Jennifer slid the assembled lasagna into the oven and set a timer. 35 minutes, she announced. "Plenty of time for Lucas to show you the workshop space we've cleared in the garage, Dorothy." As we moved as a family unit toward the garage, I noticed other subtle changes around the house, spaces that seemed more lived in, less staged. A half-completed puzzle occupied one end of the dining table. Books were stacked by comfortable reading chairs. A family photo gallery now included several candid shots alongside the professional portraits. Small adjustments, each one insignificant on its own. But together, they signaled a shifting of priorities, a reordering of what mattered. The perfect house was becoming a home. In the garage, Robert had indeed cleared a workbench space, complete with a sturdy stool just the right height for Lucas. A pegboard waited for tools, and a simple shelf stood ready for projects in progress. "What do you think, Grandma?" Lucas asked eagerly. "Dad says we can add more stuff as we go." I ran my hand along the smooth surface of the workbench, feeling the care that had gone into its preparation. "I think it's perfect for a beginning. Craftsman, your grandfather would approve." As I began unpacking Thomas's tools, explaining each one's purpose and proper care to my captivated grandson, I caught Robert watching us with a complex expression. Part nostalgia, part regret, but mostly a quiet contentment. In that moment, I could almost feel Thomas's presence, the invisible thread of his influence weaving through our family story. Not all legacies could be measured in dollar amounts or board positions. Some were counted in the passing down of skills, in shared recipes, in values demonstrated rather than preached. These were the true assets worth preserving and growing, the inheritance that mattered most. And as Lucas held his great-grandfather's hammer with reverent care, his face shining with the anticipation of creation, I knew that my revelation about the bank had broken open something far more valuable than financial truth. It had created space for authentic connection across 3 generations, a chance to rebuild family bonds on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The bank shares were just numbers on a page. This moment of intergenerational teaching and learning, this was the true wealth I'd been saving all along. The morning of the first regional bank's quarterly shareholders meeting dawned bright and clear. I dressed with particular care, selecting a tailored navy suit that Thomas had always said made me look like I could run a small country. The pearls he'd given me on our 35th anniversary completed the ensemble. Not flashy, but unmistakably elegant. Today, more than ever, I needed to project quiet confidence. As I drove downtown, memories of my early days at the bank floated through my mind. 5 years ago, I'd been a grieving widow seeking something, anything to fill the endless empty hours. Martin Greaves, the bank's president and Thomas's old college friend, had suggested I attend an investment seminar the bank was hosting. "Just to understand your options," he'd said gently. That first seminar had awakened something in me, a hunger for knowledge, a fascination with the intricate dance of numbers and markets that determined financial destinies. I'd signed up for more classes, joined investment groups, devoured books and articles. When Martin mentioned that a significant block of bank shares was becoming available, I'd seen an opportunity not just for financial growth, but for meaningful engagement with the community where Thomas and I had built our life together. Now, as I pulled into my reserved parking space, a perk of being a major shareholder, I thought about how far I'd come from those first tentative steps into the financial world. The security guard greeted me by name as I entered the imposing brick building, and several staff members nodded respectfully as I made my way to the elevator. The boardroom on the top floor was already buzzing with conversation when I arrived. Martin spotted me immediately and came over, his hand extended, in greeting. "Dorothy, excellent timing. There's someone I'd like you to meet before we begin." He guided me toward a distinguished-looking woman in her early 50s. "This is Catherine Wong, our new commercial lending director. Catherine, this is Dorothy Miller, one of our most valued board members." Catherine's handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Miller. I've heard wonderful things about your contributions to the Loan Review Committee. Please, call me Dorothy. And thank you, though I suspect Martin exaggerates my modest input." Martin chuckled. "Hardly modest. Your perspective has been invaluable, especially on community development projects. Not everyone can balance financial sense with genuine concern for neighborhood impact." As more board members and shareholders arrived, we took our seats around the polished mahogany table. I noticed several glances of curiosity directed my way. Unusual, as I typically maintained a low profile at these meetings despite my substantial ownership stake. The whispers made sense when Martin called the meeting to order and introduced the first agenda item: proposed revision to the Mortgage Assistance Program, as recommended by board member Dorothy Miller. My proposal wasn't radical, simply an expansion of the existing program that helped homeowners facing temporary financial hardship. Under the current rules, only those with perfect payment histories qualified for assistance. My suggestion was to extend eligibility to those with minor late payment histories, but demonstrable commitment to financial recovery. The data suggests that with proper support, 92% of these homeowners successfully stabilize their situations, I explained, gesturing to the charts displayed on the presentation screen. By helping them avoid foreclosure, we not only fulfill our community responsibility, but also protect our own financial interests. Foreclosures are costly for everyone involved. Bennett Harris, another major shareholder known for his conservative stance, leaned forward with a frown. "This sounds dangerously close to rewarding irresponsible behavior, Dorothy. Why should prudent borrowers effectively subsidize those who can't manage their finances?" I'd anticipated this objection. "It's not about rewarding irresponsibility, Bennett. It's about recognizing that financial difficulties can happen to anyone. Job loss, medical emergencies, family crises. Our current policy helps those who need it least while abandoning those facing genuine hardship. This revision includes strict qualification criteria and financial counseling requirements." Catherine Wong nodded. "If I may add to Mrs. Miller's point, similar programs at my previous institution actually improved our overall portfolio performance. Early intervention costs less than foreclosure proceedings, and the goodwill generated in the community translated to increased deposits and loan activity." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with various shareholders and board members weighing in. I remained calm but firm in my advocacy, drawing on both statistical evidence and personal observations from my years of community involvement. When the vote finally came, my proposal passed with a comfortable margin. As the meeting moved on to other business, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with financial metrics and everything to do with knowing that some families, including perhaps ones like Robert and Jennifer's, would now have a better chance at recovering from financial missteps. After the meeting adjourned, Martin pulled me aside. "Impressive work, Dorothy. You've come a long way from that widow who nervously attended her first investment seminar." "I had good teachers," I acknowledged, "and a lifetime of watching Thomas make business decisions based on values, not just profit margins." He smiled. "Thomas would be proud." "Speaking of family, how are Robert and Jennifer doing? I saw their mortgage came current last month." "They're making progress," I said carefully, mindful of confidentiality despite Martin's awareness of my personal connection to that particular loan. "Taking a hard look at their priorities, making some difficult decisions." "Good to hear. The assistance program you just championed might help families like theirs. Not that they'd need it with you in their corner." I shook my head. "They don't know I've been monitoring their situation, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. They're finding their own path now. That's important." Martin gave me a knowing look. "Always the mother, even in the boardroom." "I prefer to think of it as bringing a different perspective to the table," I corrected him gently. "One that remembers there are human beings behind every account number." As I gathered my materials to leave, Catherine approached me again. "Mrs. Miller, Dorothy, I wanted to tell you how much I admire what you did today. It's refreshing to see someone leverage their position to create meaningful policy change." "Thank you, Catherine, though I suspect my proposal would have fallen flat without your expert support." She smiled. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation over lunch sometime? I'm still learning the community dynamics here, and your insights would be invaluable." "I'd like that," I said, finding myself genuinely pleased by the invitation. Since Thomas died, I'd focused so much on family relationships that I'd neglected to build new friendships of my own. Catherine seemed like someone I could relate to, professional, thoughtful, and not afraid to stand her ground. We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet the following week. As I drove home, I reflected on how my world had expanded, in ways I never could have anticipated when I'd first stepped into that investment seminar, grief-stricken and uncertain. The house was quiet when I returned, but pleasantly so, a peaceful sanctuary rather than an empty shell. I changed into more comfortable clothes and made myself a cup of tea, settling into my favorite chair by the window that overlooked Thomas's rose garden. The bushes were beginning to bud, promising another season of bloom despite the absence of their original caretaker. My phone chimed with a text message from Robert. "Just heard from Realtor. House showing went well. Potential offer. Coming." Deep breaths. I smiled at my son's understated way of sharing what must be a highly emotional development. Selling their oversized home was a significant step toward financial stability, but also a public acknowledgement that their previous lifestyle had been unsustainable. In their social circle, such a move would be seen as a failure rather than a wise correction. I texted back. "Deep breaths indeed. Remember, it's just a house. Home goes with you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before his response finally came through. "Jennifer struggling with this more than she lets on. 20 years of defining ourselves by our address. Hard habit to break." This glimpse into their private struggles touched me. Robert rarely discussed his wife's feelings or their relationship dynamics with me, that he felt comfortable doing. So now represented a shift in our mother-son relationship, a new openness that I treasured. "Change never comes without grief," I replied. "Even positive change. Be patient with each other." "Thanks, Mom. Wisdom as always." Lucas asking when Tool Grandma is coming back. His words, not mine. I laughed out loud at that. Tool Grandma. Available this weekend. New project ideas brewing. We continued our text conversation a bit longer, making plans for my next visit. When I finally set my phone aside, I noticed the light had shifted, casting long afternoon shadows across the living room. Time seemed to move differently now, neither dragging as it had in the first years after Thomas died, nor racing past in a blur of meaningless activities. Each day had purpose, connection, forward motion. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. I wasn't expecting visitors, and for a moment, I felt a flutter of that old widow's anxiety, the worry about managing unexpected situations alone that had plagued me in the early days of solitude. But that feeling quickly passed as I made my way to the door. I was no longer that fragile, newly bereaved woman. I was Dorothy Miller, bank board member, financial advisor, tool grandma, and perfectly capable of handling whatever waited on my doorstep. I opened the door to find Jennifer standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and she wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual polished ensemble. "Jennifer," I said, unable to hide my surprise. She had never, not once in 20 years, come to my home alone. "Is everything all right? I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I was driving around trying to clear my head and somehow ended up here. I can come back another time if this isn't convenient." "Nonsense," I said, stepping aside, to let her in. "I've just made tea. Would you like some?" She nodded gratefully and followed me into the kitchen, her eyes taking in her surroundings with what seemed like fresh interest. While I poured her tea, she wandered to the large window overlooking the backyard. "You have a beautiful garden," she said softly. "I never really noticed before." "Thank you. It was Thomas's domain originally, but I've been learning. Plants are surprisingly forgiving of novice mistakes." Jennifer accepted the mug I offered and took a seat at the kitchen table, the same solid oak table where Robert had done his homework, where Thomas and I had planned vacations and paid bills and navigated life's challenges together. "The realtor thinks we'll have an offer by tomorrow," she said abruptly, staring into her tea. "Below asking price, but reasonable in this market." "Robert mentioned the showing went well," I said neutrally, sitting across from her. "It did. The couple loved the kitchen. The wife kept talking about holiday meals and family gatherings." Jennifer's voice caught slightly. "All the things I imagined when we bought the place, before it became just another status symbol." I waited, sensing she needed space to continue at her own pace. "I keep telling myself it's the right decision," she went on after a moment. "Financially, logically, practically, it makes perfect sense. So why does it feel like I'm losing a piece of myself?" The vulnerability in her question struck me. This wasn't the polished, controlled Jennifer I'd known for 2 decades. This was someone wrestling with the same human insecurities we all face, the gap between who we are and who we present to the world. "Because we invest our identities in our possessions," I said gently. "I did the same thing after Thomas died. My identity had been so wrapped up in being his wife that I didn't know who I was without him. It took time to remember that I was still myself, still Dorothy, even without that defining relationship." Jennifer looked up, surprise evident in her expression. "I never thought about it that way, that you might have gone through something similar." "Different circumstances, same essential challenge," I offered. "Who are we when the external markers change? What remains when the trappings fall away?" She nodded slowly. "That's exactly it. I've been Jennifer who lives in Oak Ridge Estates for so long that I'm not sure who Jennifer who lives in a modest townhouse will be." "Whoever you want her to be," I suggested. "That's the opportunity hidden within the challenge. You get to rediscover yourself underneath all those expectations and assumptions." Jennifer took a sip of her tea, her hands curled around the mug as if drawing strength from its warmth. "I've been unfair to you," she said suddenly. "For years, dismissive, condescending even. Her directness caught me off guard. I'd expected to discuss houses and finances, not navigate personal confessions. "We've had our challenging moments," I acknowledged diplomatically. "No," she insisted, setting down her mug with a decisive tap. "Let's be honest. I treated you like you were irrelevant, a relic from another era who couldn't possibly understand our modern lives." I pushed Robert to do the same. I couldn't deny her assessment, though her bluntness was startling. "May I ask what brought on this realization?" "Watching you with Emma and Lucas, seeing how you connect with them on their level without trying to control or improve them. They're just themselves with you. Authentic." She paused, struggling visibly with her next words. "My mother always made me feel like I wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not accomplished enough, not socially connected enough. I've spent my whole adult life trying to prove her wrong by acquiring all the external markers of success. And now you're letting some of those markers go," I observed. "Yes, and it's terrifying. What if she was right all along? What if I'm not enough without the big house and the country club membership and the designer wardrobe?" The pain in her question was so raw, so genuine, that I found myself reaching across the table to cover her hand with mine, a gesture of connection I would never have attempted just a few months earlier. "Jennifer, listen to me. You are raising two remarkable children. You've built a marriage that's weathering significant challenges. You're facing difficult truths with courage instead of denial. Those achievements say far more about your worth than any address or membership card." Tears welled in her eyes. "You sound like my grandmother. She was the only one who ever made me feel like I had inherent value. She died when I was 15, and I've been chasing external validation ever since." "Tell me about her," I invited, recognizing an opportunity to see Jennifer through a different lens, not as my sometimes difficult daughter-in-law, but as a woman with her own complex history that had shaped her just as mine had shaped me. For the next hour, Jennifer shared stories about her grandmother, a practical, no-nonsense woman who had managed a small family business while raising 5 children, who had taught Jennifer to make lasagna from scratch and to always look people in the eye when speaking to them, who had believed that character mattered more than circumstances. "She would be so disappointed in what I've become," Jennifer concluded, wiping away tears that had fallen freely during her reminiscences. "I'm not so sure," I countered. "The woman you're describing valued honesty and courage. You're showing both right now. Maybe she'd be proud to see you finding your way back to the values she tried to instill." Jennifer looked around my kitchen with new eyes. "Your home feels so peaceful, authentic, like it reflects who you really are instead of who you're trying to impress." "It wasn't always this way," I admitted. "After Thomas died, I kept everything exactly as it had been, as if preserving the house could somehow preserve him too. It took me almost 2 years to realize that he would want me to make this space my own, to let it evolve just as I was evolving. That's what Robert says we need to do with wherever we move next. Start fresh. Create a home that reflects who we are now, not who we were trying to be." "Robert can be surprisingly insightful when given the chance," I observed with a small smile. Jennifer actually laughed at that, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard from her. "He gets it from you, you know, that thoughtfulness. I always envied how easily he could step back and see the bigger picture while I was caught up in details and appearances." Our conversation continued, flowing more naturally than any we'd had in 20 years of family gatherings. As the afternoon light began to wane, Jennifer finally glanced at her watch and sighed. "I should get back. Emma has a debate tournament tomorrow and I promised to help her prepare." "Of course," I said, rising to walk her to the door. "Thank you for coming by, Jennifer. I've enjoyed our talk." She hesitated at the threshold, then turned to face me fully. I've spent 20 years treating you as competition instead of family. That's going to change. I just wanted you to know that. I appreciate that, I said simply. And I look forward to getting to know the real Jennifer better. After she left, I stood at the window watching her car pull away, feeling a curious mixture of emotions. There had been more honesty in those 2 hours than in 2 decades of carefully choreographed family interactions. Whether this represented a genuine turning point or merely a moment of vulnerability in a time of stress remained to be seen. But it was a beginning. An opening where before there had been only walls. I returned to the kitchen to wash our mugs, my mind still processing our unexpected conversation. The phone rang just as I was drying my hands, the landline I kept mainly out of habit and because some older friends preferred it to my cell phone. Dorothy Miller speaking, I answered. Mrs. Miller, this is Agnes Wright from the Community Library Board. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Agnes. What can I do for you? Well, as you know, we've been discussing the expansion project for the children's section, and we're finally ready to move forward with fundraising. Given your experience on the bank board and your community connections, we were hoping you might consider chairing the fundraising committee. I felt a small thrill at the invitation. The library had been a sanctuary for me after Thomas died, a quiet place to lose myself in books when the silence of my empty house became too oppressive. The thought of helping to create an improved children's space where a new generation could discover the joy of reading appealed deeply. I'd be honored, Agnes. When does the committee begin meeting? We have our first planning session next Thursday evening. I can email you the details if that works for your schedule. Thursday is perfect, I confirmed. I look forward to it. After we said our goodbyes, I found myself smiling at the synchronicity of the timing. Just as one chapter of family drama seemed to be turning toward resolution, a new opportunity for community engagement had presented itself. Life's rhythm continuing, expanding, offering new paths forward. The following Saturday, Robert and his family arrived for what had become a regular gathering, my woodworking sessions with Lucas, now expanded to include family dinner afterward. Jennifer brought a homemade lasagna, Emma carried a basket of fresh rolls from the local bakery, and Lucas clutched a cloth-wrapped package that he refused to let anyone see. "It's for Grandma," he announced importantly. "A surprise." We gathered in the garage-turned-workshop, where Lucas proudly presented me with his latest creation, a small jewelry box crafted from the oak his great-grandfather had preserved. The joinery was still a bit wobbly, the finish unevenly applied, but the care and intention behind it was unmistakable. "Open it," he urged. I lifted the slightly crooked lid to reveal a compartmentalized interior lined with felt. In the center section lay a hand-carved wooden pendant on a simple cord, a perfect miniature reproduction of Thomas's old toolbox. "Dad helped with the really hard parts," Lucas admitted, "but I did most of it myself. Do you like it?" "Like it? Oh, Lucas, I love it." My voice caught as I lifted the pendant, turning it to admire the tiny details, even the worn spot on the handle where Thomas's thumb had rubbed the metal smooth over decades of use. "It's for when you're not being tool Grandma," he explained seriously, "so you can still have tools with you." I slipped the cord over my head, the pendant settling perfectly against my breastbone. "I will treasure this always," I promised, pulling him into a hug that he returned with the uninhibited affection of childhood. Over his shoulder, I caught Robert's eye. My son stood watching us, his expression a complex mixture of pride and something deeper, perhaps recognition of the healing taking place across generations, the mending of connections that had frayed but not broken. Jennifer stepped forward, her phone raised. "Would you mind if I took a picture? This moment deserves to be remembered." "Of course," I agreed, keeping one arm around Lucas while reaching out the other toward Robert. "Come join us. Family photo." Robert moved to my side, and Jennifer beckoned Emma over from where she'd been examining the woodworking tools with unexpected interest. "You too, Em. Get in here." To my surprise, Jennifer handed her phone to Emma and stepped into the frame herself, completing our family circle. The moment felt significant, not just the photograph itself, but Jennifer's choice to be in it rather than merely documenting from a distance. After capturing several shots, we moved inside for dinner. The conversation flowed easily around my dining table, touching on Emma's debate victories, Lucas's science project, the promising house offer Robert and Jennifer had received, and my new role on the library fundraising committee. "You're building quite the post-retirement career, Mom," Robert observed. "Bank board, library committee. What's next, running for mayor?" I laughed. "Hardly, though I am enjoying discovering new ways to contribute." "You should talk to Mrs. Hayes at my school," Lucas piped up. "She's always looking for volunteers to help with the reading program. You'd be good at that, Grandma." "That's a wonderful suggestion," Jennifer said, surprising me with her enthusiasm. "Dorothy, you have such a calming presence. Children would respond well to that." The casual compliment, delivered without a hint of the condescension that had once characterized our interactions, warmed me deeply. "I'll consider it," I said. "Though with woodworking lessons and library commitments, my dance card is filling quickly." "Tool Grandma is very popular," Lucas agreed solemnly, causing us all to laugh. As I looked around the table at these familiar faces now illuminated by new understanding, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the improved relationships, but for the journey that had brought us here, difficult and painful as parts of it had been. 5 years ago, I'd been a shell of myself, defined entirely by loss. Now I sat at the center of a web of meaningful connections, engaged in work that mattered, passing on legacies that would outlive me. The financial security I'd built had opened doors, certainly, but it was the courage to walk through them, to reveal my true self, to set boundaries, to demand respect, that had truly transformed my life. After dinner, while Robert and Lucas cleared the table, a chore division that would have been unthinkable months ago, Jennifer drew me aside. "I wanted to let you know," she said quietly. "We accepted the offer on the house this morning. We close in 45 days. That was quick," I observed. "How are you feeling about it?" She took a deep breath. Lighter than I expected, like setting down a heavy suitcase I've been carrying too long. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Robert and Lucas were engaged in some sort of dish towel duel, their laughter floating back to us. "We found a townhouse in Riverview Commons. It's nowhere near as grand, but it has a small garden and a community pool. The best part is, our mortgage payment will be less than half what we're paying now." "Riverview Commons is a lovely area," I said, genuinely pleased by their choice. The neighborhood was established, diverse, and known for its strong community spirit rather than its prestige. "Close enough for frequent visits, but still your own space." Jennifer nodded. "That was a consideration. We want the children to be able to see you easily." She hesitated, then added, "And we'd like your input on making the new place feel like home. You have a gift for that, creating spaces that feel authentic and comfortable." The request touched me deeply. After years of having my taste dismissed as outdated and my input unwelcome, this invitation represented a profound shift in our relationship. "I'd be honored to help," I said simply. As the evening wound down and the family prepared to leave, Emma surprised me with a somewhat awkward hug. "Thanks for dinner, Grandma, and for helping Lucas with his projects. He talks about you all the time." "You're welcome anytime," I told her. "Even without the rest of the family, if you ever want a quiet place to study or just talk." She nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Maybe. Maybe you could teach me to bake something sometime, not for Instagram or anything. Just because. Just because is the best reason," I agreed, feeling a quiet joy at this tentative reaching out from my teenage granddaughter. "Name the day, As I stood in the doorway watching their car pull away, taillights glowing in the gathering dusk, I touched the wooden pendant Lucas had made. So small, yet containing such meaning. Craftsmanship passed from Thomas to Robert to Lucas, a tangible connection across generations. The house felt different when I closed the door. Not empty, but peacefully quiet. A sanctuary that was uniquely mine, yet open to those I loved on terms we were all still learning to negotiate. There would be setbacks and misunderstandings ahead, no doubt. Relationships, like gardens, required constant tending. But the groundwork had been laid for something healthier, more honest, more nurturing for all of us. I moved through the rooms, turning off lights, straightening cushions, my mind already drifting toward tomorrow. I had financial reports to review for the next bank meeting, woodworking plans to sketch for Lucas's continuing education, and notes to prepare for my first library fundraising committee gathering. At 68, my life was fuller and more purposeful than it had been at 48. Not despite my age and widowhood, but because of the wisdom and perspective they had given me. The courage to stand in my own power had come later in life, but it had come exactly when needed. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Silver hair framing a face lined by years of experience, the wooden toolbox pendant resting against my nightgown. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who had lived, lost, learned, and ultimately thrived on her own terms. "We did good, Thomas," I whispered to the empty room, a habit I'd never quite broken. Then I smiled at my reflection and added, "I did good." The invitation arrived on heavy cream stationery, addressed in elegant calligraphy. "The First Regional Bank cordially invites you to our annual Benefactors Gala." I'd attended this event for the past 3 years, but always as Thomas's widow, quietly blending into the background while board members and major clients conducted the real business of the evening through handshakes and champagne toasts. This year would be different. As a significant shareholder and the architect of the recently implemented mortgage assistance program, I would be attending as Dorothy Miller in my own right, not merely as an extension of my late husband's legacy. The thought both exhilarated and terrified me. At 68, I'd grown accustomed to a certain invisibility that came with being an older woman, particularly in financial circles dominated by men in dark suits. That invisibility had served me well as I quietly built my knowledge and influence behind the scenes. But now, with my program gaining attention and my position on the board firmly established, I could no longer hide in the shadows. I opened my closet, surveying the options with a critical eye. Most of my formal wear dated back to charity events. Thomas and I had attended together. Lovely but conservative choices that had been selected to complement, never outshine. Nothing that would announce, "I own 22% of this bank, and I have ideas about how it should serve this community." My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Wong, the commercial lending director who had become an unexpected friend and ally over the past few months. "Dress shopping tomorrow for the gala? My treat for lunch after." I smiled at her perfect timing. Catherine, 15 years my junior but with a similar no-nonsense approach to business, had been encouraging me to step more visibly into my power. "Perfect," I texted back. 11 a.m. at Harrington's? "See you there," came her immediate reply. The next morning, I arrived at Harrington's department store to find Catherine already waiting, elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit that somehow communicated both authority and approachability. "Dorothy," she greeted me with a warm hug. "I've already spoken with Monica in evening wear. She's pulled a few options for us to consider." I raised an eyebrow. "You seem to have this well organized." Catherine grinned. "Let's just say I've been planning this ambush for a while. You've been hiding your light under a bushel for too long." Monica, a striking woman with silver hair cropped in a stylish bob, welcomed us to the formal wear department. "Ms. Wong explained that we're looking for something that commands respect while remaining elegant," she said, leading us to a private showing room where several garments hung awaiting inspection. I expected the usual selection of matronly outfits, in navy or black, designed to help women of a certain age fade tastefully into the background. Instead, I found myself facing a collection that ranged from a striking burgundy silk pantsuit to a floor-length emerald gown with architectural detailing. These are unexpected, I managed, running my fingers along the luxurious fabrics. You've been wearing what you thought you should wear, Catherine said gently. Today we're looking for what makes you feel powerful. For the next hour, I tried on outfits I would never have selected for myself, each one revealing a different facet of who I might become if I fully stepped into my authority. The burgundy pantsuit made me feel like I could run the bank single-handedly. The emerald gown transformed me into someone regal and commanding, but it was the third option that truly spoke to me. A midnight blue dress with clean lines and subtle but stunning detail work along the neckline. The color reminded me of the suit Thomas had always said made me look like I could run a small country. When I emerged from the dressing room, both Catherine and Monica fell silent. That's the one, Catherine said finally. You look formidable and feminine at the same time. Exactly the energy the boys' club needs to encounter. I turned to study my reflection, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at me. She stood straighter than I remembered standing. Her eyes held a quiet confidence that I was only beginning to feel. The dress wasn't flashy or trendy, but it was unmistakably powerful in its elegant simplicity. You'll need these, Monica said, returning with a pair of sapphire earrings that echoed the midnight blue of the dress. They complete the look. The earrings were beautiful but beyond what I had planned to spend. Before I could protest, Catherine interjected, "Consider them an investment in your boardroom future. Sometimes the right accessories are as important as the right words in making people pay attention." I hesitated, then nodded. She was right. This wasn't about vanity. It was about strategy. In the world of high finance, appearances mattered. Not because they should, but because they did. If dressing the part helped ensure my community banking initiatives received serious consideration, then the earrings were indeed an investment. Over lunch at the bistro adjacent to Harrington's, Catherine raised her water glass in a toast. To Dorothy Miller, emerging from behind the curtain. I laughed, but the metaphor resonated. It feels strange, I admitted. After years of being Thomas's wife, or Robert's mother, to suddenly be stepping forward as just me. Not just you, Catherine corrected. Finally you, your full, magnificent self. You make it sound so straightforward. It's never straightforward, she acknowledged. Every woman in business knows that. But it's necessary, especially for women like us who are blazing trails for the generations behind us. At my age, I'm not sure how much trailblazing I have left in me, I said wryly. Catherine's expression grew serious. That's precisely why it matters more. Do you realize how many women your age have expertise and insights that never reach the decision-making table? Your mortgage assistance program is the perfect example. It took someone with your life experience and community understanding to see the need and create a solution. The waitress arrived with our salads, giving me a moment to consider Catherine's words. She wasn't wrong. The banking industry, like many others, often sidelined older women despite, or perhaps because of, their accumulated wisdom. The gala will be your coming-out party, Catherine continued once we were alone again. The old guard needs to recognize they're not just dealing with Thomas's widow anymore. They're dealing with Dorothy Miller, financial force to be reckoned with. You make me sound rather intimidating, I observed with a smile. Good. Catherine speared a cherry tomato decisively. Banking could use more intimidating women. 2 days before the gala, Robert called to invite me to dinner at their new townhouse in Riverview Commons. We're finally settled enough to host, he explained. Nothing fancy, just family celebrating the new place. I'd love to come, I told him, genuinely pleased by the invitation. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. Jennifer's handling the food. The casual way he mentioned his wife's cooking, once a rarity reserved for special occasions or Instagram-worthy dinner parties, was yet another sign of their shifting priorities. The townhouse turned out to be a pleasant surprise, far less grand than their previous home, but infinitely more welcoming. Large windows filled the open-concept main floor with natural light, showcasing walls painted in warm, earthy tones. Family photos, previously confined to formal portraits in matching frames, now included candid shots displaying genuine emotion rather than posed perfection. "Grandma Dot!" Lucas bounded down the stairs to greet me. "Did you bring your tools? I want to show you my new workbench." "Let her at least get through the door, Lucas," Jennifer said, appearing from the kitchen with an apron tied around her waist and flour dusting her hands. Gone were the designer outfits and perfect makeup. This Jennifer wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Welcome to our new home," she said, offering a warm smile. "Much smaller, but somehow it feels like we have more space. Less to maintain, more to enjoy," I observed, returning her smile as I handed her a potted herb garden I'd brought as a housewarming gift. "Fresh herbs for your new kitchen." "Perfect," Jennifer exclaimed, examining the small plants with genuine appreciation. "I've been wanting to start an herb garden. This gives me a wonderful head start." The kitchen showed signs of actual use rather than just display. Cookbooks open on the counter, a well-seasoned cast-iron skillet on the stove, a refrigerator, covered with Lucas's artwork and Emma's debate tournament schedule. "Something smells amazing," I commented, inhaling the aroma of garlic and herbs. "Coq au vin," Jennifer replied. "My grandmother's recipe. I found her old cookbook while we were packing up the house." She gestured toward an ancient, stained volume propped open on the counter. "It's been therapeutic, reconnecting with her, through cooking." Robert appeared, carrying a bottle of wine and glasses. "Mom, welcome to our downsized life," he said with a genuine warmth that reached his eyes. "Surprisingly liberating, isn't it, Jen?" Jennifer nodded, returning to her cooking. "The first few weeks were an adjustment. Now I can't imagine going back to all that excess." "Lucas was saying something about a workshop?" I prompted, curious to see how my grandson's woodworking interest had translated to their new space. "In the garage," Robert confirmed. "We carved out a corner for his projects. Not as spacious as our old setup, but more practical, actually. Come see." The garage workshop was indeed compact, but thoughtfully organized. Lucas proudly showed me the pegboard where his tools hung in careful order, each outline drawn around the tool so its proper place would always be clear, a technique Thomas had used in his own workshop. "Dad and I built the workbench together," Lucas explained, running his hand along the sturdy wooden surface, "with real woodworking joints, not just screws and nails." "Mortise and tenon," Robert added with undisguised pride. "Dad taught me that technique when I was about Lucas's age. Hadn't used it in years, but it came back surprisingly quickly." I felt a lump form in my throat at this tangible connection across generations. Thomas's knowledge, preserved in Robert's muscle memory, now passed to Lucas's eager hands. This, far more than any financial legacy, was the true inheritance that mattered. "What are you working on now?" I asked Lucas, noticing a project covered with a cloth on one end of the bench. He glanced at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "Show her, buddy. It's looking great." Lucas carefully removed the cloth to reveal a half-completed jewelry box, similar to the one he'd made for me but with more refined joinery and decorative elements carved into the lid, a pattern of interconnected roses. "It's for Mom," he explained. "For her birthday. The roses are because her grandmother's name was Rose." "It's beautiful craftsmanship," I said genuinely, examining the precise corners and smooth finish. "Your great-grandfather would be very impressed." Lucas beamed at the praise. "Dad says I have the Miller hands." The Miller hands and the Miller patience, Robert added, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. Dinner was served at a modest but beautifully set table in the dining area that flowed seamlessly from the kitchen. Emma joined us, more engaged and present than I'd seen her in years, her phone nowhere in sight. "Mom's been teaching me Grandma's recipes," she explained as she helped serve the food. "It's kind of cool, learning these traditional techniques, like a connection to our history." "Emma has a natural talent for flavor combinations," Jennifer said, her expression softening with maternal pride. "She's already improving on some of the original recipes." Throughout the meal, I was struck by the easy conversation, the genuine laughter, the absence of tension that had characterized so many family gatherings in their previous home. Everyone seemed more relaxed, more authentic, as if shedding the oversized house had allowed them to shed performative versions of themselves as well. After dinner, as we lingered over coffee and a simple but delicious apple crisp Emma had prepared, Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, there's something we wanted to discuss with you," he began, exchanging a glance with Jennifer. "It's about our financial situation." I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. Despite the positive changes in our relationship, I still had no intention of disclosing the full extent of my monitoring of their mortgage. "We've been meeting with a financial advisor," Jennifer continued, "getting our affairs in order after years of, well, chaos. One thing that became clear is how much we've been squandering on interest payments and late fees. The mortgage assistance program at First Regional has been a lifesaver," Robert added. "It's given us breathing room to restructure our debt without penalty." I carefully kept my expression neutral, though internally I felt a surge of satisfaction that my banking initiative was directly helping my own family, exactly as I'd hoped, but couldn't guarantee when I'd proposed it. "I'm glad to hear the program is working as intended," I said diplomatically. "What we didn't realize," Jennifer said, "is that the program was your idea." I blinked in surprise. "How did you learn that?" "Catherine Wong," Robert explained. "We met with her about refinancing options now that we've downsized. She mentioned that the assistance program was the brainchild of a board member named Dorothy Miller. Said you were becoming quite the advocate for community-focused banking." "Catherine probably shouldn't have shared that information," I murmured, making a mental note to discuss professional discretion with my enthusiastic ally. "We're glad she did," Jennifer said earnestly. "All this time, we thought you were just quietly observing our financial struggles, maybe even judging our mistakes. To learn that you were actually creating solutions at a systemic level." She shook her head, clearly emotional. "It means more than I can say. The program isn't just for you," I clarified. "It's designed to help anyone facing temporary financial challenges. But you saw the need partly because of us," Robert pressed gently. "Didn't you?" I considered denying it, maintaining the professional distance I'd carefully cultivated between my personal concerns and my banking initiatives. But we'd come too far in our family healing to retreat into half-truths now. "Yes," I acknowledged. "Watching your struggles made me aware of a gap in our services. Many families face similar challenges. Good people who made reasonable choices, but encountered unexpected setbacks. The bank's previous all-or-nothing approach seemed unnecessarily punitive. So you changed the system instead of just bailing us out," Robert said, a note of awe in his voice. That's remarkable, Mom." "It was the right business decision too," I pointed out. "Foreclosures are expensive for everyone involved. Helping clients recover financial stability benefits the bank in the long run. Still," Jennifer said, "your approach speaks volumes. Instead of solving just our problem, you created a solution that helps everyone in similar circumstances." She reached across the table to touch my hand. "Thank you. Not just for us, but for all the other families who won't lose their homes because of your initiative." The simple sincerity of her gratitude touched me deeply. For the first time, I felt fully seen by my daughter-in-law, not as a burden or an obligation or even as a surprising source of financial leverage, but as a person of substance who contributed meaningful value to the world. The bank's annual gala is this Saturday, I found myself saying. I'd be honored if you'd all attend as my guests. The invitation surprised even me. I'd never brought family to bank functions, preferring to keep those worlds separate. But something had shifted in our relationship dynamics, creating space for new kinds of connection. Really? Robert looked startled but pleased. We'd love to, wouldn't we, Jen? Jennifer nodded eagerly. Absolutely, though I have to warn. My gala attire is considerably less impressive these days, she added with a self-deprecating laugh. Part of our financial recovery plan involved selling most of my designer collection. Catherine dragged me shopping yesterday, I told her. I've apparently been dressing too conservatively for my position. She'd probably be delighted to help. You find something suitable without breaking your budget. I'd like that, Jennifer said thoughtfully. It's been ages since I dressed up for anything other than impressing the country club set. Does this mean we have to wear ties? Lucas groaned. Afraid so, buddy, Robert confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. But just for one night. Emma will need a dress too, Jennifer mused. Though convincing a teenage girl to attend a banking gala with her family might be our biggest challenge yet. Actually, Emma said, looking up from where she'd been, quietly listening. I'd kind of like to go. Ms. Peterson was just talking about careers in finance during our women's leadership seminar. This would be a chance to see what that world is really like. The genuine interest in my granddaughter's expression filled me with unexpected joy. For years, Emma had seemed determined to define herself in opposition to adult expectations. This glimpse of her emerging intellectual curiosity and her willingness to explore it in our company felt like yet another healing in our family tapestry. The evening of the gala arrived with perfect early autumn weather, just crisp enough for elegant wraps, but not so cold as to require cumbersome overcoats. I dressed carefully in my midnight blue gown, fastening the sapphire earrings Catherine had insisted upon. The woman who looked back from my mirror seemed both familiar and strange, unmistakably me, but with a presence and authority I was only beginning to fully embrace. Robert arrived to escort me, looking handsome in a well-tailored suit that showed signs of quality despite not being the designer label he would have worn a year ago. Jennifer and the children would meet us at the event, as Emma had a debate practice that couldn't be rescheduled. You look beautiful, Mom, Robert said as I opened the door. That color is perfect on you. Thank you, I replied, accepting his compliment without the self-deprecation that had once been my habit. You're rather dashing yourself. As we drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel where the gala was being held, Robert seemed uncharacteristically nervous, repeatedly adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. Everything all right? I inquired. He sighed, then offered a rueful smile. Just realizing how long it's been since I attended an event where I wasn't trying to impress potential clients or social connections. I'm not entirely sure who I am without that agenda. You're Robert Miller, I said simply. My son. Lucas and Emma's father. A man rediscovering what actually matters to him. He nodded slowly. It's strange, this midlife reinvention. I keep expecting to feel a sense of loss for the lifestyle we've left behind. Instead, I mostly feel relieved. Relief is undervalued as an emotion, I observed. It means you've set down something heavy you've been carrying too long. Jennifer said almost exactly the same thing, he noted with a small smile. You two are becoming more alike than either of you would have admitted a year ago. We've both had to reinvent ourselves after defining our identities through external markers for too long, I said thoughtfully. That creates a certain kinship. When we arrived at the hotel, the valets and doormen greeted me by name. a small courtesy that nonetheless reflected my changing status. The grand ballroom was already filling with the region's financial and social elite, the men in formal dark suits, the women in designer gowns that communicated both wealth and taste. Martin Greaves, the bank's president, spotted me immediately and made his way through the crowd, champagne flutes in hand. "Dorothy, you look absolutely stunning, and this must be your son Robert." "Martin, yes, this is my son." "Robert, Martin Greaves, the bank's president and an old friend of your father's." The men shook hands, exchanging pleasantries while I scanned the room for Catherine. She appeared moments later, resplendent in a structured red gown that somehow managed to be both fashion-forward and appropriate for a senior banking executive. "You wore the dress!" she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek. "And the earrings. Perfect. You look exactly like what you are, a financial force to be reckoned with." "You're determined to remake my image entirely, aren't you?" I laughed. "Not remake," she corrected. "Reveal. The Dorothy Miller who's been hiding behind sensible suits and self-effacement all these years." She turned to include Robert in the conversation. "Your mother is quite the revolutionary in our stuffy banking world, you know, creating programs that actually help people while still maintaining the institution's financial health. Radical concept." Robert beamed with evident pride. "She's always been ahead of her time. The rest of us just occasionally catch up." I was saved from responding to this unexpected praise by the arrival of Jennifer, Emma, and Lucas. Jennifer looked lovely in a simple but elegant black dress I recognized from Catherine's favorite boutique, accessorized with a single strand of pearls that had once belonged to her grandmother. Emma had opted for a sophisticated pantsuit in deep burgundy that highlighted her transition from teenager to young woman. Even Lucas, despite his earlier protests about formal wear, looked handsome. In his suit, his hair tamed for the occasion. "Mrs. Miller," Bennett Harris approached our family group, champagne in hand. "I must congratulate you on the early success of your mortgage assistance program. The preliminary data suggests it's performing even better than projected." "That's gratifying to hear, Bennett," I replied. "I understand you were initially skeptical." He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I've been known to resist change. In this case, I'm pleased to have been proven overly cautious." "Change is necessary for growth," I offered diplomatically. "In institutions as well as individuals." "Indeed," he agreed, his gaze shifting to my family. "Are these your guests this evening?" I performed the introductions, noting with quiet satisfaction how Bennett's demeanor shifted when he learned he was speaking to my family. There was a new respect in his manner, not just the perfunctory courtesy he might have shown Thomas's widow's relatives, but the more substantial regard afforded to the family of a valued colleague. Throughout the evening, I watched with a mixture of pride and amusement as my family navigated the banking world. Robert engaged several board members in thoughtful conversation about community development initiatives. Jennifer, free from the pressure to impress, revealed herself to be a charming and attentive listener, drawing out personal connections with the spouses of key executives. Emma shadowed Catherine, absorbing everything about the professional women in attendance, from their conversation styles to their career trajectories. Even Lucas found his place, charming Martin's wife with his earnest questions about the massive floral arrangements decorating the ballroom, which she had helped design as part of the event committee. Watching them, I felt a profound sense of completion, as if fragments of my life that had existed in separate compartments were finally being integrated into a cohesive whole. My banking world and my family world, once carefully segregated, were merging in ways that strengthened both. The highlight of the evening came during Martin's address to the assembled guests. After the usual updates on the bank's performance and community initiatives, he gestured toward where I stood with my family. "I want to particularly recognize board member Dorothy Miller, whose innovative mortgage assistance program has not only helped dozens of families maintain stable housing during temporary financial setbacks, but has also improved our loan performance metrics by reducing costly foreclosure proceedings. The room filled with applause. I felt Robert's hand on my shoulder, a gentle squeeze of pride and support. Dorothy represents the best of community banking, Martin continued, combining sound financial stewardship with genuine concern for the customers we serve. We're fortunate to have her perspective on our board and look forward to more of her innovative thinking in the years to come. More applause followed, along with raised glasses in my direction. I acknowledged the recognition with a modest nod, though internally I felt anything but modest. This public validation of my contributions, not as Thomas's widow carrying forward his legacy, but as Dorothy Miller in my own right, marked a turning point I would never have imagined possible when I'd first stepped hesitantly into that investment seminar 5 years earlier. Later, as the evening wound down and the crowd began to thin, Catherine found me near the dessert table where Lucas was enthusiastically sampling miniature pastries. "Quite the family you've brought tonight," she observed. "They've made quite an impression." "They've surprised me," I admitted. I wasn't sure how they'd manage in this environment. "Sometimes people rise to the occasion when given the chance," she said thoughtfully, "rather like you have these past few years." Before I could respond, Emma approached, her expression animated. "Grandma, Ms. Wong has been telling me about the summer internship program at the bank. She thinks I should apply next year." "That's wonderful, Emma," I said, genuinely pleased by her enthusiasm. "Though I thought you were considering law school eventually." "I am, but Ms. Wong says banking experience is valuable background for corporate law. And anyway, I should explore different fields before committing to a specific career path." Catherine winked at me over Emma's head. "Your granddaughter has been peppering me with insightful questions all evening. She has a natural aptitude for financial concepts." The Miller financial acumen appears to have skipped a generation and landed squarely on Emma, I agreed, watching my granddaughter's face light up with the recognition of her own potential. As we gathered our belongings and prepared to leave, Martin approached one last time. "Dorothy, the nominating committee is meeting next week to discuss board leadership positions for the coming year. I'd like to put your name forward for the Community Relations Committee Chair." The offer took me by surprise. Committee chairs were typically drawn from the most experienced board members, those with decades in the banking industry. "That's a significant responsibility, Martin." "One, you're uniquely qualified for," he countered. "You've demonstrated both vision and practical know-how with your mortgage initiative. The bank needs that perspective at the leadership level." I felt a momentary flash of doubt, the old hesitation that had kept me in the background for so long. Then I caught sight of my family waiting by the exit, standing tall and proud in their new, more authentic identities. If they could reinvent themselves, stepping into more genuine versions of who they were meant to be, how could I do any less? "I'd be honored to serve," I told Martin. "Thank you for the confidence." As we stepped out into the cool evening air, stars visible despite the city lights, I felt a profound sense of alignment, as if the various pieces of my life were finally moving in harmony rather than in conflict. The woman who had emerged from behind the curtain, as Catherine put it, was proving to be stronger, more capable, and more influential than I ever could have imagined. Robert offered his arm as we walked toward the valet station. "You were the star of the evening, Mom. I've never been more proud." "It feels strange," I admitted. "For so many years I was content to be in the background." "Maybe you were never meant for the background," he suggested. "Maybe you were just waiting for the right moment to step forward." As our cars arrived and we prepared to part ways, Robert and Jennifer taking the children home while I drove. Myself. Lucas darted over for one final hug. "You looked really important tonight, Grandma," he whispered. "Like a queen or something." I smiled at his childish but perceptive observation. "Not a queen, sweetheart. Just a woman who finally found her voice." Driving home through the quiet streets, I found myself humming a tune Thomas used to love, an old jazz standard about new beginnings and second chances. The melody felt right for this moment of transformation, this unexpected blossoming that had come not in the spring of my life, but in its rich, fulfilling autumn. 1 year had passed since I revealed my ownership stake in First Regional Bank. The seasons had cycled through their familiar rhythm, autumn leaves giving way to winter, snow, then spring blossoms, and now summer's lush abundance. But while nature's patterns remained constant, nearly everything else in my life had transformed. This morning, I stood in my garden, pruning Thomas's roses with the careful attention he had taught me. Though my hands were not as steady as they once were, they had developed their own wisdom over the years, knowing just where to cut, how to shape each bush for optimal blooming. The roses had never looked better, their crimson and pink blossoms nodding in the gentle breeze. "You've become quite the gardener," observed Catherine, who sat at the patio table nursing a cup of coffee. Our Saturday morning gatherings had become a tradition over the past year, informal strategy sessions that blended personal and professional matters with an ease I'd never experienced in the male-dominated banking world. Thomas would be amazed, I agreed, setting aside my pruning shears and joining her at the table. He never thought I had the patience for gardening. People are full of surprises when given the chance to grow in unexpected directions. Catherine glanced meaningfully at the folder between us, the final proposal for First Regional's new community investment initiative, which would come up for board approval next week. As chair of the Community Relations Committee, I had spent months developing this program, a comprehensive approach to neighborhood revitalization that combined affordable housing loans, small business incubation, and financial literacy education. If approved, it would commit significant bank resources to transforming struggling neighborhoods throughout our region. "Do you think Harris will support it?" I asked, referring to Bennett, who had become an unlikely ally in recent months. Catherine smiled. "After the quarterly numbers your mortgage assistance program produced, he'd be a fool not to. Bennett may be conservative, but he respects results." The doorbell rang, interrupting our discussion. I wasn't expecting additional company, but Saturday morning visits from family had become common enough that I wasn't surprised to find Robert on my doorstep, toolbox in hand. "Morning, Mom," he greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek. "Lucas sent me to prep for this afternoon's project. He's determined to finish Emma's graduation gift before the ceremony next weekend." "Catherine's here," I warned him quietly. "We're discussing the community investment proposal." Robert nodded, understanding the significance. "I'll work quietly in the garage. You won't even know I'm here." But Catherine, ever observant, had already spotted him through the open door. "Robert, perfect timing. I was hoping to get your perspective on the small business component of our proposal. Your experience transitioning to a smaller, more sustainable business model might be valuable input." In the year since downsizing their home and lifestyle, Robert had made other significant changes. After careful consideration, he had left his high-pressure position at the elite private school, where he'd taught for 15 years. The prestigious title and connections had never compensated for the constant stress and ethical compromises the job required. Now he taught history at the public high school and ran a small woodworking business on weekends, teaching basic carpentry skills to adults and children alike. The change had meant a substantial pay cut, but with their reduced living expenses and eliminated debt, the family was actually more financially stable than they had been during their outwardly prosperous years. "Happy to help," Robert said, setting down his toolbox. "Though I'm hardly an expert on business development." "You've built a successful side business with minimal capital investment," Catherine countered. "That's exactly the kind of entrepreneurship we're trying to support in communities that have been overlooked by traditional lenders." As they discussed specific provisions of the proposal, I excused myself to brew a fresh pot of coffee. From the kitchen window, I could see them engaged in animated conversation. Catherine taking notes as Robert described the challenges and opportunities he'd encountered in launching his modest woodworking enterprise. The scene struck me as emblematic of how thoroughly the boundaries between my personal and professional lives had dissolved over the past year. Where once I had kept these worlds rigidly separated, banking Dorothy entirely distinct from Mother, Dorothy, now they flowed together in natural harmony, each enriching the other. By the time Lucas arrived with Jennifer and Emma for the afternoon's woodworking session, Catherine had integrated Robert's suggestions into our proposal and departed for another engagement. The garage workshop filled with the comfortable sounds of family, Lucas explaining his design for Emma's graduation gift, a beautifully crafted lap desk for college, Jennifer and Robert discussing logistical details for the graduation party, Emma alternating between nervous excitement about her upcoming transition to university and impatient curiosity about her gift. "No peeking," Lucas admonished when she tried to lift the protective cloth covering his work in progress. "Grandma, tell her it'll ruin the surprise." "Your brother is right," I confirmed, laying out the specialized tools we would need for the day's work. "Patience is part of the woodworking tradition," says the woman who peeked at every Christmas present Dad ever gave her, Robert teased, referencing a family joke about my inability to wait for holiday surprises. "I've grown wiser with age," I replied with dignity, though we all knew it wasn't. Entirely true. Some character traits remained constant despite life's many transformations. The afternoon unfolded in a rhythm of shared work and easy conversation. Lucas had developed impressive skills over the past year, his hands steady and sure as they guided the wood through its transformation. Emma, despite her initial reluctance to engage with old-fashioned crafts, had discovered an unexpected aptitude for design, sketching intricate patterns for Lucas to incorporate into his projects. Jennifer, once so concerned with projecting an image of effortless perfection, now sat comfortably on a workshop stool, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, laughing at her own clumsiness as she attempted to sand a small piece of wood to Lucas's exacting standards. "I'm hopeless at this," she admitted cheerfully. "My talents definitely lie elsewhere." "In the kitchen," Robert affirmed. "That sourdough bread you made yesterday was better than anything from the artisanal bakery." The casual compliment and Jennifer's pleased smile reflected their renewed connection, a marriage rebuilt on authentic appreciation rather than performance and expectation. As the sun began its westward descent, casting long shadows through the workshop windows, Lucas pronounced the lap desk nearly complete. "Just needs the final finish and the brass hinges installed," he declared with justified pride. "I'll finish it tomorrow so the lacquer has time to cure before graduation." Emma, still forbidden from seeing the project in progress, groaned dramatically. "The suspense is killing me. At least tell me what wood you used." "Cherry," Lucas revealed, "with maple inlays for the design elements. Grandpa's favorite combination. Right, Grandma?" "Indeed it was," I confirmed, touched by this further connection to Thomas, whose influence continued to weave through our family's story despite his physical absence. As we cleaned up the workshop, my phone buzzed with a message from Martin Greaves. "Board vote scheduled for Tuesday on the Community Investment Initiative. Looking good for approval. Congratulations in advance, Dorothy." The message sent a small thrill of satisfaction through me. The proposal represented months of careful research, coalition building, and strategic planning, work that drew on both my financial acumen and my understanding of community needs. If approved, it would become my most significant contribution to the bank's evolution toward more socially responsible practices. "Good news?" Robert inquired, noticing my smile. "Potentially," I replied, not wanting to tempt fate by claiming victory prematurely. "I'll know for certain on Tuesday." Later, as the family prepared to leave, Emma lingered behind, waiting until the others had moved toward their car before approaching me privately. "Grandma, I wanted to tell you first," she said, her expression both nervous and excited. I've accepted the summer internship at First Regional. Ms. Wong called yesterday to confirm the placement. That's wonderful news, Emma, I said, genuinely delighted by her decision. Catherine speaks very highly of your potential. It's because of you, Emma said earnestly. Watching how you've built something meaningful there, how you use your position to actually help people instead of just making money. It made me realize there are ways to work in finance that align with my values. Her words touched me deeply. For so many years, I'd doubted my impact on my grandchildren, particularly Emma, who had seemed determined to maintain emotional distance from the entire family. To learn that she had been observing and drawing inspiration from my choices filled me with a profound sense of intergenerational connection. You'll forge your own path, I told her, squeezing her hand gently. But I'm honored to have played some small role in expanding the possibilities you see for yourself. After they departed, I returned to the garden, gathering a bouquet of Thomas's roses to place on the dining room table. Their fragrance filled the room, sweet and complex, evoking memories of shared meals and conversations across 4 decades of marriage. You should see them now, Thomas, I said aloud, addressing his memory as I often did in private moments. Not just the roses, though they're magnificent this year. Our family. They've found their way back to something authentic. And so have I. The following Tuesday, dressed in the midnight blue suit that had become something of a signature look, in my evolving professional identity, I sat at the boardroom table as Martin presented our community investment initiative to the full board. The discussion was thorough, but not contentious, a testament to the careful groundwork Catherine and I had laid in the preceding months, addressing potential objections before they could become roadblocks. When the vote came, the proposal passed. Unanimously, even Bennett Harris raising his hand in affirmation, a small nod of acknowledgement passing between us as he did so. What had begun as a personal revelation at my birthday dinner had evolved into a comprehensive reimagining of my relationship with family, community, and self. The bank shares that I had once viewed primarily as financial security had become a vehicle for meaningful impact. After the meeting, as board members gathered in small groups for informal discussion, Martin approached with a distinguished-looking couple I didn't recognize. Dorothy, I'd like you to meet James and Elaine Townsend from the Regional Community Foundation. They've expressed interest in potentially partnering with us on the neighborhood revitalization component of your initiative. I extended my hand, pleased by this unexpected opportunity. A partnership would certainly amplify our impact. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where our missions might align. As we exchanged ideas, I found myself drawing on multiple dimensions of my experience, financial expertise developed over years of careful study, community knowledge gained through decades of involvement, interpersonal wisdom accumulated through family relationships, both challenging and rewarding. The artificial boundaries between personal and professional, between family and finance, between past and future, had dissolved into an integrated whole. Later that evening, I sat in my garden as twilight descended, the roses luminous in the fading light. My phone chimed with incoming messages. Catherine sharing news of potential expansion of our mortgage assistance program to other banks in the region. Jennifer sending photos of Lucas putting the final touches on Emma's graduation gift. Martin confirming the partnership meeting with the Community Foundation. Each message represented a connection that would have seemed impossible just 1 year earlier. Professional collaborations, family bonds, community engagements all flowing together in a life that had expanded rather than contracted with age. I typed a response to Jennifer's message. The lap desk looks magnificent. Lucas has his great-grandfather's eye for detail. Then I set the phone aside, content to sit in the gathering dusk as fireflies began to illuminate the garden. At 69, I had discovered that life's most significant revelations could arrive at unexpected moments, even at a birthday dinner when paper plates became the catalyst for reclaiming one's power. The journey from that moment of truth to this peaceful evening had not been without challenges. Relationships had required renegotiation. Boundaries had needed clarification. Old patterns had resisted change. But the authentic connections that had emerged were stronger and more nourishing than the performative roles we had previously occupied. As darkness settled fully over the garden, I made my way inside, switching on lights against the gathering shadows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A meeting with potential community partners, Lucas's woodworking lesson, preliminary planning for a financial literacy program Emma wanted to help develop during her internship. The schedule of a woman fully engaged with life, not retreating from it. I paused at the hallway table, where Lucas's wooden pendant still held a place of honor beside my keys and wallet, a daily reminder of connections that transcended time and change. Beside it lay the formal invitation to Emma's graduation ceremony, where I would sit, not as an awkward appendage to the family, but as a fully integrated member, grandmother, mentor, role model. "Paper plates," I murmured, smiling at the memory that had set everything in motion. Such an insignificant object to catalyze such profound transformation. But perhaps that was life's greatest lesson, that moments of truth could arrive in the most ordinary packaging, waiting only for the courage to unwrap them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.